It is Saturday, April 25th, 2020. There are currently 957,000 cases, roughly, of coronavirus in America, confirmed cases, with 54,000 deaths and counting. New new footage from the Larry King show many years ago, decades ago, adds credibility to Tara Reade's accusation against Joe Biden. It will be interesting to see if the DNC does anything about it. And probably most importantly, today, the WHO warns that there is no evidence COVID-19 patients cannot be reinfected. Hello, welcome to the Culture, Language, and Art of the Worker show. I am Sparks, the white European reincarnation of Mao Zedong. Hide your landlords.
Hello, I'm Maddie, and I have pink hair tonight, and a pink drink.
Pink!
Feeling very
I am
pink
Park
today.
Park. The Funky Gang couldn't be here. They drove their bus into a lake. Things happen.
Yeah, I actually just was taking notes on that last little headline as we started, and that kind of caught me. So.
Yeah, I was going to say I hadn't actually heard. I mean, I knew that, but I didn't know that they had made that announcement.
Yeah. It's, Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about the precariat. That is the precariousness of the proletariat, or the precarity of the proletariat. Fucking whatever, you get it. It's a mashup name. It's like a jackalope, but with words.
This is the Precariat 3. Precarity's Revenge.
Precariat harder. With a vengeance.
Yeah.
Return of the precariat. So tonight, what we want to talk about a little bit is the state's, more specifically our state's plan to reopen the state, or business, I guess, within the state, as these pushes continue from, all around. We had protests at the State House or wherever. It wasn't quite as big from what I've seen as in some other places. But, this AstroTurf movement is certainly going around with people just clamoring to be able to open up their whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's important to point out that, like, all these people holding signs like, I need a haircut and massage is essential, like, they don't want to go to work to do those jobs. They want you to go to work so that they can enjoy themselves.
Well, that's part of it, for sure. But I think the majority of we will find out in probably in a few weeks exactly who's kind of funding the AstroTurf
Yeah.
part of this. The media won't care broadly, but this is essentially people who want their to be able to open up their business and um, their business and be able to extract surplus value from their employees.
Yeah.
They're whatever. They own a hotel, they own a chain of restaurants or whatever, and like in the wrong analysis of this would be it's dire, and of course we should listen to them. Um, and so, like, because we have to abide by this system. Uh, um, so, like, of course we should get back because, we have people who are, you know, um, the only way they are able to exist is by selling themselves on the free market into wage labor. Um, so, the wrong analysis would be like put these people back to work, and that's kind of what I want to touch on tonight is who's taking the real risk, who always takes the real
Yeah.
risks, even outside of a crisis like this, um, for working class people. Um, we're getting messages.
Mhm.
For working class people, like at least parts of this crisis are just
Part
their
of their
normal
life.
existence, right?
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, um, like if it's just me, we shouldn't be beyond like safety and whatever and reopening before we can be relatively assured of public safety. I would also say this would be a great time, um, since there is a high latent risk for people not to go back to work on purpose, especially in these deeply exploitative sectors, um, to until not only can safety be assured, but um, some dignity and equity
Yeah.
are kind of
Some
brought
improvement
into
of
the
the
system.
conditions.
Exactly. I mean, in some ways, the capitalist class is always going to drag us down with it, right? But in some ways, they are on their back foot. That's why there is, desperate calls for
getting back to work.
I mean, your large corporations, some of them are going to grow, right? Like Jeff Bezos is going to make a ton of money, and the economy is going to consolidate after this,
Yeah.
big time. Even without all the bailouts they just gave to
Mm.
industries, but so some people are going to benefit off of this because it's shut down large parts of the economy. So Amazon or Walmart or whoever, these big businesses are pretty much the people that can stay open for multiple reasons. So they're going to benefit disproportionately than smaller ones. And like the last in line is going to be, you know, uh, even the nurses and the doctors on the front line aren't being taken seriously.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and it is nice to see
they're being like fired or put on leave for speaking out about how they're not being given proper equipment, etc., etc., etc.
Well, also they are, besides like the brave medical stuff they're doing, and the huge amount of risks they're being asked to expose themselves to, for no real net benefit. I mean, I think for a very specific, I think for people who work with like in nursing homes, maybe exclusively, I think our state has just done working on like a $300
A week.
bonus,
Yeah.
essentially. This is the point, like not going back to normal of saying, you know, the especially very specific parts of industry have earned this through this crisis. What we all need to say as workers is that we deserve the dignity of the full value of our wages. Um, and this is a great moment for that. I mean, some of us are technically, involuntary general strike is kind of occurring through large sectors.
But if we could concentrate it and like focus it.
Yeah, and keep it going past, past these moments of when they go, okay, well, we've made it safe.
Yeah, past when it's not an
I would
option
say,
anymore.
yeah, like great. Also like I don't trust you.
Yeah.
But, like, for reasons we'll get into in a second, but also like, okay, now that I've got you, I deserve better pay, better hours, a more democratic workplace, where I can, we can make our own decisions, and it can be at the very least a little more level, or have some dignity of like control with the thing you do for most of your life.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and we want assurances that we'll be protected, and we want healthcare and the things that truly protect people, keeping them out of precarity, um, keeping them out, if you have healthcare it's going to be easier for you to
Also, sorry to cut you off, but it's worth pointing out like subsidized or like universal childcare would be a great benefit. Like that's why half of the workforce had to leave in the first place. I mean, not like so much school kid age because that would have happened either way, but like people with kids in daycare, they like expanded all these crazy rules and were saying, like you can take in as many kids as you want even if you're not licensed because we know that like our nurses need childcare and blah blah blah. It's like that's not safe though. Like
Yeah.
I feel like those rules are there for a reason.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways they could mess that up, though. I feel like if we're gonna go down that route,
Yeah.
before we get off onto this tangent, whatever, I'm just gonna put down a flag here and say, like, I would add a lot of stipulations to that. Like, yes, there should be universal childcare, um, and whatever, but one thing that we have to pay attention to is how so you're guaranteed an education through public education through the state or the town, and how that's been kicked down to the states and to the local level and produces disproportionate outcomes, tough outcomes for a lot of people, because property values, let's say, or cuts with funding, all these sorts of things. So, like, if it's going to be used as an austerity program, like public schools are, which I mean, it should be part of that. It should be part of an entire reform, I guess, of really improving the functionality, but also kind of the care given in public schools.
Yeah.
And which should be included. Okay, but here we go. So I have this. Why is it down there? Cool. Just a moment. All right. New Hampshire hospitality industry proposes 4-phase reopening plan. So this is from the. Do you want to read it? It's just from.
Were you saying who it was from? Like,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Dining out may literally be the first step in dining out again. Okay. Let's see. Addressing the governor's economic reopening task force on Thursday, Mike Summers, CEO and president of New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association, proposed dining al fresco as the first step of a 4-phase plan for restaurants to begin catering to patrons when the stay-at-home order is lifted. He said that restaurateurs are familiar with public health issues surrounding the preparation and serving of food and accustomed to following regulations and undergoing inspections.
Yeah, okay. So basically, this is from the CEO and president of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association, who's saying essentially like hotels and restaurants are used to following, sanitation procedures, so this will be no big deal. And then basically, he wouldn't really give, a timeline of when this would truly begin to roll out, but he says sooner rather than later. Outdoor dining could begin as early as May 5th. Picnic tables could be spaced to ensure social distancing. Essentially, the second phase would be opening to indoor dining, and the same protocols would be in place, and they would encourage reservations, and diners would be asked to wait outside until a table is ready, and those tables would be arranged to ensure social distancing. I assume like it would have to be 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
All of them, and sitting. Go ahead.
Before I was hotel closed, literally the day before, I had helped remove a bunch of tables and chairs from our restaurant for this. So I was kind of pissed off initially when they told me, like, oh, by the way, we're closed.
Well, also, I feel like
Well,
as far as his first phase part of it of people dining outside, aren't people already allowed to? Like, that's already happening. At least when I was still working, which was last month, but, people would come in and order, be annoyed when we told them that they couldn't eat in the store, and then they'd go sit outside.
Yeah, but
I guess the tables weren't spaced 6 feet apart.
right, but that's like for a cafe that just like has tables outside is one thing.
Yeah.
But like I think they're talking
restaurant.
about
Yeah.
like waiting on people
Mhm.
outside, essentially.
so glad they're going to adhere to this guideline because I don't want to have to be putting that fucking furniture back.
Yeah, well, okay, so the third, we'll see, because the third step is essentially all the elements of the first two, but increasing sittings to 12 or 13, which just seems like whatever, arbitrary.
Yeah.
And the fourth phase would mark a return to conventional operations, but with enhanced sanitizing guidelines.
So everything goes back to normal, except you have to clean a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sanitize everything constantly.
Right, well...
And that'll keep you safe.
But, okay, so... we don't know what the rollout of this looks like. They essentially admit that places that couldn't operate under these guidelines in a profitable way are basically going to fail regardless. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. That's part of this consolidation a little bit. If you have a tiny little diner with like a counter and 2 tables, that's going to be tough, and you'll probably still do like takeout or whatever if that's what you're doing already, but this is
this is about increasing business.
This is about helping exclusively bigger places. Um, and what it really is reopening. They got to get the hotels open because people want to come. They're already here. I mean, we've all seen them. And they're, I want to say, the locals are pretty good, especially like compared to at the beginning of all this about taking it seriously. I see a lot of people wearing masks. I see. I do because I do the early morning shopping like once a week. I go at 7 a.m.
Yeah,
because it's like, oh, it'll be less people, but and normally it would be.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not lately. Like it is, at whatever the grocery store or Walmart or whatever. It's like any other day, at noon. Basically, is what
yeah.
it's like at 7 a.m. Right when they open the doors, there's a line. Because they have the barricades and stuff and all
Yeah.
the markers.
Mad Max.
Yeah, and but then I went into a gas station, and this dude, you want to talk about getting back to normal? There was a man standing right behind me, like this close to me, and I just straight up left, man, because I
Yeah.
wasn't doing that. Um, so yeah, but it's weird how it shifted those things where everybody's suddenly up early, um, which is crazy. But this is about getting the hotels open, getting the basics for tourists open, um, because they're worried about in their very kind of myopic capitalist view. They're worried about what's going to happen to this system when it's already pretty rickety and held together with duct tape and reliant on exploitation. And what's going to happen if this continues for 6 weeks or something?
Yeah.
And what the conversation needs to be, and what we really should be talking about as communities. Every individual community should be having this discussion and figure out what's going on, because there's no like one size fit all thing, but there are some pretty good like default guidelines for sure. But um, it, we need to figure out what the next year is going to look like. I mean, it would be worth talking about what the next 5 years are going to look like. But like that story at the beginning, the WHO saying there's no evidence that patients can't be reinfected.
Well, and I've read about patients that have been reinfected, like confirmed.
Yeah, and we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole tonight about COVID directly, but like they don't, because symptoms present, I guess. So a few days or whatever at least after infection, which is when your antibodies start building. They don't know if you can build an immunity to it. They don't know if the antibodies help. Now that's just something I read on a science or medical website. That's vague and whatever, but I mean that's the point. We
don't know anything about this.
Yeah,
you can't treat it like, oh, once everyone gets sick, we all have herd immunity and we can go back to normal.
There's too many people talking matter-of-factly about these things, and frankly, we don't know anything important for the most part.
Yeah.
And that's what this response has been, and that's what we were telling people at the beginning was, this is exactly why they're doing this, social distancing protocol and the stay-at-home orders and whatever. It's because they generally don't know what to do about it. This is a like hold-in-place type thing in the safest possible, in terms of
slowing infection.
Yeah, well, it's just like we don't know what else to do.
Yeah,
we can't figure this out.
We don't know how to keep you safe. Stay home. You're probably safer there.
It's just trying to stop interactions, to stop the spread, because genuinely, like we don't have a lot of tricks in the arsenal.
There's
I mean, we
nothing
can't
really
even
to
deploy
treat it.
testing.
You just kind of ride it out.
Yeah. So, but even even the whole self quarantining and whatever, quarantining at home and all these sorts of things, has had its own complications because frankly, they just nobody with any semblance of power truly knows how to solve this. They're just trying to wait it out and hope that
they don't lose too much money in the interim.
well, okay, so but even if you're relatively benevolent, hope that um, casualties are a minimum. Um, if you want to apply some moral decency to people, even the person, even I, what am I gonna? How can I fight this other than just staying home? There's not a lot of guidance there, so we're learning every day. And there's a lot of people speaking way too matter-of-factly about that. I see that in a lot of kind of reactionary things of being like, I know everything about this virus. Let me tell you, here's why we don't have to be scared of it. And I mean, under normal circumstances, you could make some of those, proclamations with a good chance of being right, even if you didn't know what you were talking about. But I mean, this is just so left field. Anyway, that's not what I want to talk about tonight. What I want to talk about tonight is who takes the risk, right? So what this is going to do, these sorts of protocols, is you're going to make employees clean.
Every surface that a person touches.
Right. So essentially, you're going to have to interact with everything more anyway to clean it.
You're going to put yourself more at risk.
Okay, yeah, and that should track relatively to be that your cleaning negates that risk, but at the same time, I think it's a special kind of inter-system foolishness that the assurance here from this gentleman in particular seems to be that businesses are good at mitigating risk to begin with. They already know what they're doing. The profit motive will keep people safe. As if businesses don't cut corners under normal circumstances, much less take an economic and health crisis on top of all these things. So there are people that take it very seriously. A lot of them because they're scared. But I think the one class of people I wouldn't want to put in charge of my personal safety would be someone who
I was just gonna say, having worked in food service for at least 10 years, there are certain people in every restaurant or whatever that do take it seriously, but not on the large part. And I've worked in places where the managers are the ones telling you to skimp on these things, and a lot of the people who work in our industry are teenage and college age kids, and relying on them or on anyone other than yourself really to make sure something is sanitary and not going to infect you.
That's a difficult statement to unless I clean it, it's not clean.
Well,
I don't know if that's universally true.
I'm not saying unless you clean it, it's not clean, but to assume that because these people work in the food industry and sanitize things as part of their job, that it's going to be automatically safe for you to go in there.
But the point is that the workers won't do it.
Yeah.
The point is that there's no real benefit to business taking it seriously.
Yeah.
They don't incorporate that risk truly, especially in a situation like this. If you were giving a bunch of people food poisoning, that would be one thing. But if your employees and if you add to the spread of this disease throughout your community, nobody's ever really gonna know because they're not going to.
They're not doing contact tracing or anything like
But
that.
they're also not gonna care.
Yeah.
And my point isn't that like people won't do it, even though I think there's a case to be made about like not putting people in this situation to begin with.
Yeah.
To have to deal with something this serious, especially so that like people can get a cup of coffee or something. Like I think there's like, as far as level of risk goes, it just doesn't seem like, for the workers want the wage. I don't know like why, like that we can take care of.
Yeah.
We certainly can, and we should be, and we could do that in multiple ways. So that's why they have to be there, right? The demand side of that is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why. And I think that might be something that, like, there are kind of two things that are kind of concerning and of note here. One is that, like, what if demand is still, like, non existent, basically? And you've opened up and you've exposed people to extra risk and whatever, and like nobody's profitable because maybe okay, demand regenerates and stuff, but people have changed.
Yeah.
Large portions of people will still be home. Essentially, like especially in this community, like what if the only people you're serving are tourists? Is that not like that's a risk category under this?
That is a huge risk category.
But also, you're not making a profit, so like what was the point of it? The other thing is essentially this part I wanted to get to here, which is summer's expected restaurants would require a week or 10 days lead time before reopening, blah blah blah. But here's the important part. He said the industry would need to mount a marketing campaign to assure customers they could return to restaurants without jeopardizing their health.
That's like the scariest fucking sentence.
How the fuck do you make that assurance?
Yeah, right. That's what I said. I said you cannot make that assurance.
And why would you bother?
But it doesn't make it true.
Yeah, and also just like why? that seems like.
Hey, you're just blatantly lying to people to be like, it's safe now. Come back and spend your money here. We promise it's safe. And then once they all get sick, you're like, well, shit. We thought it was safe.
Well, but it's just unnecessary propaganda because the people it's going to work on wouldn't have cared in the first place.
Yeah.
And the people it's not going to work on, it wouldn't have worked on anyway, so that's wasted money. But also, like, maybe there's some in-between population that's like, that's so, like, I don't know, like movable, actionable by advertising that like whatever, some weird marketing campaign about like getting back out to the restaurant, which is not something anybody needs to do.
Yeah.
It's not necessary at all.
You can eat at home.
Like you could still do takeout or whatever, that business is or whatever. But if there's a certain population that can be moved by that, like you could have kept them safer. And the population's interacting with that.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing is, we know it's not safe. Like that's why things close down. They have no real criteria, and they're not going to do the testing. And even if they do the testing, like are we in agreement here? Like we're all going to have a weather eye on this forever, for the definite future, right? Like. There's no forgetting this.
Yeah, that's like, I can't understand the people who are like, I just can't wait for this to be over so I can go to these big concerts and sports games. And like,
I'm sure some people will.
I know, like, I understand missing that because, like, yes, I'm sure I miss, like, outings in public too. But, like, can you imagine after all this being surrounded by people and, like, feeling safe?
But even if you're not surrounded, like, this whole concept of essentially like saying, hey, jackass, everything's fine now.
Yeah.
Of spending money on that.
When you could use that money for so many better things.
Yeah, like, I don't know, like protecting workers and paying wages.
Just so many
whatever.
things.
Yeah. Anyway, so like that just seems that just is a huge red flag to me that they're even debating like spending money to be like to do like propaganda to say like everything's fine.
Come back
You know,
out.
the beach is safe and shark free from, you know,
Operation Butt.
yeah. It's a bunch of sharks telling you the beaches are safe.
Yeah.
Like the meme. Um, so if you work in a hotel, of course, hotels and motels would follow the same CDC procedures as restaurants. Congregating in lobbies would be discouraged. Guests would check in digitally to limit contact with employees. Swimming pools and exercise rooms would not be open until phase 3, and then only with strict sanitizing procedures. Okay, so what this says to me is essentially like, okay, but like, what about the housekeeper and the dishwasher and the people in the laundry room and all these sorts of things? Like, there's nothing in this that's like other than this kind of like these platitudes, these like hollow
Like, we'll sanitize
phrases
things
about
more.
yeah, we're just
It's gonna be
it'll
cleaner.
be fine. Yeah, but it's like
But the person
Even if
cleaning that
that's true-
stuff is taking the greatest risk.
right. Even if that's true, like yes, somebody is doing that. Absolutely, you know, and like let's not forget here that like behind all this is the additional risk um, being put on like whole communities, but also like really all of this is getting pushed to the healthcare community, right? So any of this pressure, any if extra people are getting sick because they rush to do whatever, like that's all going to the hospital. It's
Mhm.
going to be nurses and doctors and EMTs and whatever that are really going to be taking the extra risk. That's who you're putting in danger.
They actually had their highest rate of cases hospitalized today at 95. It's the most they've had so far.
There's
So like,
it's 30 something percent of the people confirmed cases, I believe, in New Hampshire are healthcare workers.
yeah.
Which makes sense. But this is the point, right? It's you're always going to push the risk to the people, you know, to the janitors, to the housekeepers, to the cashiers, to
And it doesn't just put those people at risk, it puts their whole family at risk. That's
Well,
why
yeah.
all you see is videos of, you know, nurses crying because they haven't seen their baby in 4 weeks because they don't want to put their child at risk. You know, it's like doctors are sleeping in tents in their garages, and people are out protesting that they want to go back outside.
Yeah. So like let's bear that in mind too. Like every time you go out to a restaurant or you stand too close to somebody, knowing that you shouldn't be, what you're saying is like,
I don't care about you.
Well, but like who are you really applying the risk on? Yes, the people who work there. You know, certainly the person you're too close to and whatever. But also that's what I mean. Downstream of all of this, where it ends is in a healthcare facility. Yeah. So those are the people you're really throwing all the risk onto, because they're gonna have to take care of your sick ass, or the people the 10 people you got sick, and the 5 of their fellow employees that got sick.
I think we're gonna see, like, I could be wrong, but I think we're gonna see some, you know, nurses on strike, and like healthcare workers are going to be striking after this. They're doing it already in France, I believe.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean,
maybe it's hopeful, but like,
yeah, no, and we should be hopeful. And I'm not trying to be whatever, but like, but that's gonna be tough for them. I'm making assumptions here. Well, my assumption is based on the fact that this is one of those things where essentially like these people don't just do, like nurses especially don't just do that work because whatever, like it pays really well. As far as I know, it does
not
pay all that well, especially for the amount of work you're being asked to do, and especially
also,
right now. But the larger point here is that essentially I freaking lost my train of thought.
There it goes.
On the tracks there, Sparks.
What would you say?
I said keep it on the tracks there, Sparks.
Well, keep getting phone calls. I will take phone calls later. You can message us with your comments, and I will read them aloud. And if they're funny, I will LOL at them. But okay. Oh, so these people, what they're doing is a lot of them do it because they're just naturally compassionate people. Like they genuinely care about people.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain amount of like, I don't know, wanting to help, wanting to do good that you
Yeah.
have to be to work in any of these settings. I work in a healthcare setting. Like yeah, it was about money. Every job is about the money for the most part.
But you also
But,
have
like-
to want to help people.
But yeah, and like okay, I mean, yeah, if we want to be those people, like not everybody who works in a healthcare system.
It's not universal, but for the
who
most
cares?
part,
But like you're accepting way more responsibility than you're getting back in terms of getting paid back.
Yeah.
So like yeah, you do have to care, and there's always a certain amount of sacrifice, and now it's just like monumental.
yeah,
And
it's just all sacrifice.
and that's what I think people who, if you're being like flippant or naive about this, still you gotta remember that like that's who you're really putting at risk is beyond the obvious ones.
It's the
right?
people who you're going to be
Beyond
relying
the
on to take care of
immunocompromised or
you
whatever. Yeah, it's all gonna end there.
when you get sick.
It's all gonna end there, and there's no reason anybody should like decide like them getting a fucking cheeseburger is like more important than that.
Cheeseburger parties.
All right, we're actually gonna take a call here in a second once he calls in. But yeah, so yeah, that's the point. Is it's breaking out hugely in institutions right now. And we don't need extra risk being put on these people. It's goddamn lunacy. So this rush is sheerly because it's plainly because we have a bad system, and there are people. It's not. I mean, for some people, it's a survival thing, and that's why they want their wage back. But like, for most of these people, like clamoring to get back to things, it's just because they need to exploit another human being for one reason or another. Even if like you're a good boss and you don't realize that you're doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to capture the value from someone's wage, and that's why you're doing it. And we need to like fix some of this stuff. And there's really no good reason. All right, here we go. Hello. We're gonna take a break just real quick. All right. Who is this? Introduce yourself.
This is Matty Ratface. How you doing?
We're doing all right. We're doing all right. We're holding it together.
You know, it just occurred to me that your the picture for your podcast is a cat, and I call myself Matty Ratface.
Yep,
And cats eat rats.
we do.
And that's not cool. We're not gonna hang out like that.
Hey, well, you're the one who introduced yourself
Yeah.
as Matty Ratface.
We got it.
Yeah, well, you guys put up that picture, so you're gonna have to change that picture. I'm sorry.
You're lucky we're social distancing.
Anyways, listen, I've been following kind of intently, and my wife works at a nursing home in Ospey. A little insight: it's now an insane asylum. It's ridiculous over there. They're testing everybody for a temperature or a cough or symptoms and asking a questionnaire every time anybody goes in or out of that building. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they keep sucking my wife into extra shifts to do all this extra screening. It's ridiculous. Oh man, and the poor woman is freaking out, and God bless her for putting up with it. She's one of the strongest-willed people and most compassionate people I've ever met, and it's never been more apparent than right now. And it sucks that it's a tragedy like this for me to recognize it, but she's really one of the best people I've ever known.
Oh,
That was sweet.
you're gonna make Maddie cry. Yeah, I mean, well, that's we alluded to it, but we didn't talk about that directly, which is essentially like this is the other issue with it is like all these, when we were talking about that before with oh well they'll just sanitize everything and businesses are used to this sort of thing. If we want to broaden the scope of what he's talking about a little bit, like who's gonna be doing all that extra work is the workers who are almost entirely poorly paid and in situations of precarity. So it's just like purposefully increasing that and saying like, no, it's supposed to be like the business is like, oh, we got this. And that's the other part that's offensive about these kind of ad campaigns.
Because they're not the ones that are handling it.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, it doesn't say person X worked, an extra shift so that your punk ass could get a burger or something. Now in a nursing home it's a different situation, but like these are the people on the front lines who are having to do this extra work. In a large portion is because like we don't pay them well enough, so they're understaffed.
I know. I feel for every one of those food service workers or the grocery store folks. I feel terrible for them every time I go to the grocery store, which is only 1.5 times a week. And I try to load up as much as I can without looking like a prepper or something. And I'm going by myself. I go instead of my wife or my mother-in-law. I have to go by myself because we're not allowed to go in couples anymore.
Right.
One person, one card, that whole thing. And then you serpentine through the aisles. Shit, I don't need. I do all that, and I feel terrible when I get to the cash register and I load up that belt, and there's like the one person that's it's open, and I feel terrible. They're wearing a mask and gloves, and they got the little plexiglass thing up.
No, I don't want them to have to touch all the stuff I just touched.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, man. But I got my mask on, and I'm like, you're touching stuff that you just touched with other people's stuff that you touched other stuff, and then so those gloves are well contaminated.
Right.
When you take them off, you still have to use hand sanitizer before you can pick your nose. It's been almost 10 days since I picked my own nose.
He's counting.
That's a lie.
Then three, which is almost 5, which is pretty much 10. Okay?
He's in prison.
So I feel terrible for those folks, and I can only imagine. I live with a woman who works in a nursing home who has the most vulnerable population ever, and I listen to it a little bit every day when she comes home, a little bit, but like, man, the stresses she has to be going through has to be ridiculous. And I would talk to her more about it if she were home more, but guess what? She's gotten all the overtime she can handle because anybody who comes in with a temperature over 99.5, I think is the cutoff. And women fluctuate a lot, it turns out, depending on when they want to fluctuate anytime.
They decide.
Their temperature can be normally 100 degrees, and that's okay for them, but because of these quarantine protocols, that's too much, and they send people home all the time, and they call Alex in, and she has to go to work.
Yeah.
So, poor girl, man, she's getting beat up with hours, and I don't know what she looks like anymore. I forgot what her face looks like.
Yeah. Well,
So
are they doing anything extra? From what I heard, there was some like $300 bonus they were trying to get to people.
so yeah, they were going to do that, and then they weren't going to do that, and then they're going to do it again, and now they're not, and then they are, and then now they're,
Right. I guess my question
and
is, you haven't got anything yet.
I got jack shit,
Yeah.
and Alex so far has gotten jack shit, and they say May 1st is when she's going to get her. I don't know if they're calling a stipend or.
Yeah, I believe
bonus
that's what it's gonna
or
be.
something. An extra $300 a week
Right.
just for being on the front lines.
Yeah.
And if it comes through, honestly, I think it's a good idea. Not because of my personal situation, because I'm trying to think about the millions of other poor nurses that have to face this.
Well, I'd like to see a
They're-
permanent pay increase.
I was gonna say, like-
you know, like
Why are you
You might
just
have
gonna
noticed.
take it away after? You're admitting that
You might
these
have noticed
people are important and that they put themselves at risk to do this job. You can't just say, but not that important anymore.
Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be a temporary thing. My wife shouldn't be making $13 an hour to do what she does every day, regardless. Like before this whole thing, like $13 or $14 an hour, whatever she's making. It's that to wipe old people's asses for $14 an hour. You kidding me? I didn't make coffee at Dunkin' Donuts for $14 an hour. It's man, I think she deserves every penny of whatever else they get, and she should keep it forever.
Yeah. 100% agree. I think that's an important, and that's what I'm seeing largely from the general strike that's being organized. Is the first point on all of these things is essentially getting not only like improving the conditions for healthcare workers across the board in terms of wages, in terms of safety, but also recognizing the importance of this and the role it's played, like the large role in mitigating as much as we possibly can, just the horrors of this circumstance, and seeing permanent changes to the system where they will be regarded as, you know, the true legitimate heroes that they are. So we shall see, but that is what makes it all the more important. Matt, we're gonna keep going, but thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Hey, if I may say one more thing.
Yeah.
Nurses are great. The RN that delivered my baby was one of the best people I've ever met. She was great. Yeah, she knew everything in and out, took care of everything, and saved my kid. She got tangled in the umbilical cord, almost died, and had this emergency C-section. And that nurse was amazing and pivotal in making sure my baby got delivered the way she was. And I tell you, nurses are amazing people, and they certainly love what they do. And my wife is among them, and I'm so proud that I could hold the girl down like that.
You're lucky.
Yeah, and I tell you, if anything was different, I'd be so despaired. Anyways, yeah, I hope this whole friggin' thing is over by August, because I want to get back to shooting clubs and guys punching each other in the shoulder.
Absolutely.
Anytime
Yes.
now.
Yes, I can't wait to touch other men myself.
Dude, I'm growing this gnarly beard. As soon as this is over and you're allowed to, I will let you touch it.
Awesome. I look forward to it. I will lick it up and down. Hey, let's have you on here on a good day, and we'll talk about community defense and guns and stuff.
Anytime. And if you'd like, I can talk about getting old, because I'm kind of old now. So we can put those two together.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about death sometime. That'll be a good change of pace. All right, man. You take care.
Hey, take it easy.
as always, thanks to Matt for calling in.
Yeah.
Our number one fan, and truly we are fans of his. But solidarity with all nurses, all healthcare workers, but nurses especially, and critical support for nurses. Get them the shit they need. It's fucking crazy. But yeah, so these are the issues, right? As people begin to flood back into hotels and restaurants and what have you. These will be the people,
At
like
the
you
greatest risk.
and Parker
Mhm.
and our friends who are nurses and healthcare workers and work at the grocery store. We got a lot of friends who work at grocery stores and in retail and shit like that. That's still open. That have been going through
Yeah.
this entire thing. And yeah, saying they're heroes, it would be, to undersell it. But like, we can't leave it there. We have to. It's on us as well to support these people and make sure not only that as much of the risk is mitigated as possible, but also to like advocate for them from a position of safety. I mean, it is a type of privilege to be able to be at home right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's complicated, right? And I'm not trying to make a broad universal statement. Some, obviously people are struggling even while sitting at home. That's part of the precarity we're talking about. But there is a relative position of privilege from sitting at home and a relative position of safety. So if we can use that safety and energy
Do
to
something with it.
yeah
Help these people who are
yeah.
helping us.
Organization is important, and all these sorts of things. We see people making masks and PPE and devoting their time to things like that, and that's great. Making hand sanitizer, all these things, feeding people. In the future, one thing we have to do is sustain this, right? Because eventually, however long this lasts, at some point, um, we will get complacent about this to a very dangerous degree. If something socially doesn't change, that's part of the normal we can't go back to. For the most part, we've come out of that complacency largely. Most people are taking this seriously to the degree that they would take it seriously, as individuals. But we can't fall into that old pattern of being like, okay, everything's fine now, so whatever. We have to incorporate this information.
Yeah.
And until, I mean, this might just be how things are now. And we have to be real about that and understand the extra risk that Parker's going to take and you're going to take just doing your goddamn jobs for what a lot of people isn't a living wage. And we also have to understand the fact that like personal space should already been a thing.
Yeah.
And we should just carry that forward for sure. Basic.
We were all standing way too close before.
Yeah.
Like I was never comfortable with it.
Basic health practices are important, and eventually we're gonna have to reorganize things because if this continues much longer, what you're going to see is just a handful of places are basically doing okay, and everybody else is, everybody's going to be working in a warehouse or serving takeout or as a nurse. And that will push even more people into precarity. And we don't have a capitalist answer to that by saying, let's just get everybody back to work and blah, 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 so we can grind the wage system again. What we say is, the necessities of life and some basic things should be freely available to everyone. That would vastly improve the baseline for all. It's common sense. And people call you utopian and whatever, and they'll use communist as a slur, like, I care. But there's no goddamn reason why, nobody should have water or clothes or food or a house.
Or healthcare.
Healthcare for sure. But there's no reason. There's no reason. There's no legitimate answer.
Yeah.
That is pure heartless propaganda, and I won't hear any of it. And so, if you want a watermark for how we're dealing with this, these are the things we need to do. We need to develop these alternative systems of production and distribution. We need to make things as communities and as a nation, but as a global system, in a non-exploitative, equitable, productive and responsible way. And like, I don't know. There's just I'm trying to say too much, but the basic of it is like there's no good reason somebody shouldn't have a goddamn house, and like there are people that I'm sure are working right now in a grocery store because they're an essential worker, and they're sleeping on the street or live in a shelter, or they're isolated from their family, or one of their family members is in the hospital and they can't see them because these people are quarantined. So, like, just all the fuck yous to anybody who's not taking this seriously and seeing the dire need for change. If you want to argue, how we distribute these things or how we produce these things, I mean, there's some ground there, but the fact of the matter is, like, just food, water, shelter, healthcare, clothes, education, all these things.
Everyone deserves.
Just give them to people and shut the fuck up. Let's dive into that a little bit. So one thing I wanted to talk about very quickly was, Parker, you won't be able to see this, but I will read it to you. Yeah, maybe you can. Yeah? You see what I'm seeing?
Nope.
Oh, well, go ahead. Why not? Oh, there we go. One sec. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so anyway. So this is the MIT living wage calculator. It's something I've been meaning to get into for a little bit, and I'm just gonna skip through this because the important parts here is like even this living wage calculation is not great. It has flaws and is imperfect for a lot of reasons. However, there is it does help to see like the scope of the issue a little bit here. So essentially, like, we can go through all this, but these numbers are kind of meaningless until you break them down. So like for a living wage would give a single adult $67 a week to spend on food, right? $50 a week to spend on medical care. $712 to spend on housing, $75 on transportation, which is higher than medical care for some reason, and other, which is laughable, is $55. I don't know who
So
has.
would other
who has
include
the
your
other.
utilities and all your other bills?
Yeah, I suppose.
And
Yeah, or like
childcare.
clothes. No,
Yeah.
childcare. A single adult would not have
Oh.
a child to put in childcare. I mean, we can break that down. That's kind of whatever. But I mean, show me the place that's cost $700 to
Yeah.
rent. That's laughable. But $712 a month. That's your monthly rent. That's $164 a week, which is a lot of goddamn money. And this also shows like how out of balance things are, a little bit. You on a living wage, you could budget $67 for food, but 3 times as much has to go to housing. They're equal necessities.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some like wonk wants to argue why housing is more expensive than food and blah blah blah, or like why that makes sense. And like, yeah, sure, like fine, but like it doesn't make any sense in terms of the fact that like no one should have to budget these things to begin with. And I really
Just
don't
to
want to hear
survive.
arguments. Yeah, I really don't want to hear some BS argument about how like people are lazy unless we did this or what have you. So the really disturbing thing is when we look at single parents and how much additional cost they're expected to bear. Single parents will have to pay essentially $100 a week for food. I guess that's assuming a child only eats $33 of extra food a week, which I have a child and I can tell you that
That's
is
not accurate.
inaccurate. $176 a week just in childcare. That means this person immediately is taking about $180 pay cut. Immediately, that's a pay cut. That's something they did in order to work, to survive. So we begin to see what austerity looks like. Medical care is $144 with the child. Now, something that's interesting is the difference. So a single adult is $50, with a child is $144. As a couple, you could budget $116, but as a couple with a child, it's $139. So it's odd that the most expensive, essentially, that MIT could see trend of healthcare costs would be the single parent. And it seems like a huge jump. If you talk about a couple going to a couple with a child, the difference is like $20. If you're talking about a single adult going to a single adult with a child, it's about $90.
That's insane.
So yeah, that's kind of punishing. You could be the asshole that's like, well, they're probably on Medicaid anyway, and I would say good, and also fuck you,
And also you don't
like,
fucking know that.
Medicaid is tough. But no, I mean they probably are, but that's the thing, is like it's reliant on this system. Like, why is that the better answer? I'm just saying, well, for this subset of people who, for no reason we've put them into an extremely precarious situation, then yeah, we'll cover the kid or something.
Yeah.
Like food is healthcare too, and housing is healthcare. So what
Yeah.
the fuck? So a single parent, it's about $240 a week for housing. About $1,040. I'm assuming that's like a 2-bedroom is what they're trying to get at. And best I can tell, the median, I believe, 2-bedroom in Carroll County is about $30 or $40 more expensive than what they average. So I don't really know how they got their numbers, because these are both from 2018. So yeah, no. And that's what I kind of mean, is for whatever reason they understate these things.
Yeah.
But even let's take this at face value.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even with their understated.
Okay, you would have to make, as a single parent, $53,286 a year. That's a living wage as a single parent. Okay, $25.6 an hour. Do you know a single parent that makes $25 an hour, more than that?
No.
They're not making a fucking living wage.
Most of them are making half of that.
Yeah. So be uncomfortable with it, because that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. And I'm not gonna entertain any of this bullshit of like, well, they shouldn't have had a kid, blah blah blah.
There's so many reasons that's bullshit.
Yeah. No.
Like, too many to get into.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I mean, literally, not even the better off ones that I know, right? People who work in construction or whatever and make, you know, a better wage than a lot of people I know
Mm-hmm.
who work at coffee shops and stuff. They don't make that. I don't make that much.
Yeah.
So you better not die of coronavirus, because we're gonna suffer as a one-income family. I mean, even a living wage wouldn't. Yeah, whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
I tried to make a bad joke, and
It took me a minute to get it. I was a little slow on that one.
But one of the last things I just want to get onto here for a minute, and then I'm gonna pull, if I can find it, I'm gonna pull up my graphs and stuff like that. Oh, I don't know where it went. Oh, is this it? Yes. Okay. Is like, think about how often, like, you guys in your particular professions interact with not only people directly but indirectly.
I mean, that's my entire job.
Right. I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just like.
If I'm not interacting with the person, I'm cleaning their dishes or wiping down their table. You know, like, that's my whole job.
Yeah. Well, you have to carry people's luggage, don't you?
And I handle dirty linens as well.
Yeah.
And clean toilets.
Nice.
Yeah, one of my stores, we have to clean the bathrooms.
Yeah, literally. I mean, you know,
that's the whole job.
Yeah. There's no. It's the money making thing. There's no reason to have hotels open right now, unless you're doing it in some hypothetical, like, whatever, skeleton crew basis to like house some influx of people that are coming to do support work at like hospitals or something. But I just, in this community, like, I don't think that's happening. Certainly not in a broad way.
And I would say that's not their motivation behind it, very obviously.
Yeah. So. Yeah. But that's what's crazy, and you know, we all need to think about this, because genuinely, this is what's coming. Is them going to promise us everything's okay, and we can return to normal, and not only will we not, but we can't, and trying to will kill a lot of people.
Yeah. It's going to cause a lot of damage.
So, but, I mean, who doesn't love the smell of bleach? Okay, so just some things I'm going to run through here real quick. So, for our county, let's take a look at this. Median earnings per worker, lowest in the state. Median household income, lowest in the state. The United States average is lower, but still. These ones are interesting because it shows you the earnings distribution, and something is definitely throwing this off, but a little bit. But we see here, like, 7% of people make $100,000 or more, right? 34% make between 20. This is for sure the largest cohort, right? But between $20,000 and $50,000, which is like such a broad.
That's a huge gap.
Yeah, it's a very broad gap, but especially considering like this is like 15 to 20. Yeah. So, but less than $10,000 is 21%. That's the second largest cohort. If we look at the gap between male and female earners, you can see the median earnings for a man is $52,000, and the median earnings for a female is 38,000.
That's way more than I make.
Well, no, yeah, but that's the median.
Yeah.
So, but you
It's
can
like
even
a-
see
What?
you can
You'll
see
see
the gap
Crazy.
is skewed
Yeah.
hard. Average hours worked in a week. I mean, this is all pretty statistically similar. We have a lot of self-employed people, but the average hourly earnings again are the lowest in the state. And the average obviously is skewed, but regardless. So what was there were a couple things I really wanted to get to. If we look at source of income, we see Social Security in this county is the largest it is for the rest of the state. It's 11%. The closest is Grafton County with 9%. Well, I guess Belknap has 10, whatever. But the rest of the state is around 7 or 8% for the most part. We see investment and retirement is the largest in the state. So it's 20%. So retirees and Social Security. That's people's main source of income at like 35%. That's a third. Self-employment is 9%, and everybody else is a wage earner. We do have the most households with retirement income. That tracks with the rest of the stuff. But here's another important thing, okay? So we have cost of living versus the U.S. average. So 100 represents the U.S. average. So on overall cost, we're significantly above it. Groceries, just slightly above it. Housing, significantly above the average housing cost. Utilities, above. Transportation cost, way above. Healthcare cost, way above. Miscellaneous, I don't know what that means, but significantly above. So you see, like, this is not a cheap place to live either. That's meaningless right now. We do know, however, that there are about 15,000 people in the service industry around here, and that makes up about 60% of the workforce. And the average wage, best I can tell, which again will be skewed by high wage earners, is still the average wage is $16 an hour, which is skewed highly.
Yeah.
But even that is like low.
Yeah.
We have the lowest labor force participation rate. We have the highest not in the labor force. Not significantly, but higher. We have the most part-time workers. In fact, about a third of people work part-time.
They work multiple jobs part-time.
Yes, well, that certainly is possible. That certainly is possible.
At least a lot of the people I know.
You see, about 1 in 4 families is single earner. So think about that when we're talking about that, right?
Yeah.
What do you have to make as a single earning family? Okay, $26 an hour.
Yeah.
What's the average wage for most workers in the service industry?
16.
The average wage, which again
Which
is
is
not
skewed.
representative of the
I would
normal
say you're
wage.
probably looking at more like $10 to $11 an hour.
Yeah, well, in the service industry especially.
Yeah.
I would say 13. I would say is close. But again, that depends. But yeah, so again, if you go and listen to our podcast episode of why the poverty line is bullshit and doesn't help anyone and is made to make you think that there isn't much poverty, um, you should go give that a listen. So you can see where we see these numbers really harshly is when we see poverty by age group. Okay, so why did it do that? So you see that essentially the largest sector of poverty obviously is people in their working years.
Hey, it's us.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that would skew.
Yeah, you would think that wouldn't make any sense at all, right?
Yeah, about 54%. You could say even about 75. 75% of people living in poverty, if you include up to 64 years, which most people are working up to 64. But like the prime working years,
like 18 to 64.
Yeah, that's where.
That's where you're going to be the most poor.
Well, that's statistically who is most in poverty. Which, again, if you refer to our episode or like you have a sense about these things, you know that if you're under the poverty line, you are desperately impoverished.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about that specific one is under 12 being so high.
I mean, my best guess is that relates to this quite a bit.
The parents.
Yeah, and I would guess they don't break this down, but I have seen this before. I will try to find one sometime, and maybe I'll tag it in. But that effectively in this area, at least, single women, I think between like 18 and 35 maybe, are the individual highest cohort, essentially, most likely to be in poverty. So I would say because that's just a guess, right? And I'm making assumptions, but I would say that's why these things are interrelated, and that's why you see that skew pretty high. Now, go ahead.
Earlier, the wage gap between male and female workers. Yeah. So a female, of course, she's going to end up being impoverished.
Right. But we see, it's about 15% on either end of the spectrum here, right? That's who maybe it sounds a certain way, but that's who you would expect to be at most risk, right? Under this system, if you had to guess who is at most risk for poverty, you'd say the very young and the very old. Because they're deliberately put into precarious situations, which they have less control over than someone in their prime working years.
Holy shit.
But certainly, like, being in your working years doesn't skew you closer to being out of poverty. In fact, for whatever reason, it makes it more likely. So there are multiple reasons for that we probably don't have to go into. We can see, almost 30% of people who didn't finish high school are in poverty. So again, this is another reason why we need to raise wages in general, because there's no reason why someone just because the public school system failed them should then have their problems compounded. But also we need to seriously fix our public schools so that kids are able to finish and actually get something out of it. And it's not treated as this austerity program where we continue the kind of tragedies in somebody's life. So if we see in poverty employed, right, 18%. So 18% of people in poverty are employed. Only, an equal amount of them are not in the labor force at all. We get, an average amount of public assistance probably. The commute thing is something we can address sometimes, but for whatever reason, females commute less, so that's fun.
The patriarchy doesn't want women driving.
Yeah. So this is, I assume this is an average. Again, they don't elucidate on this very much, but in food prep and serving, in this county, there's about just over 1,500 people. Total annual earnings, it says, is about $28,000. I assume that's an average, and I assume that's highly skewed. But even in there, which I would assume, maybe, I don't know if it's weird to assume this, but I would assume there would be more women in that industry than men.
There are.
Well, we can't make that definitively. I would assume that. That still the average earnings for men are higher than women. Which is interesting. But then we look at things like healthcare support. Now, it'd be nice if they outlined what exactly that means. They don't say nurses directly. I don't know if that's one-on-one aides or
if it's janitorial.
No, I doubt that.
Okay.
But there's a very small number of them. And,
that
I don't know if that's
actually make less
assistants
than
or whatever.
Females in that.
Yeah, again, I assume that's because how you would expect it to track, because you would expect there would be more women in that sector. But yeah, you can see just how these things that have kind of the most jobs are the most undervalued, and this is highly skewed because I feel like they're leaving out huge sections, because there's 2,500 people in management, and yet somehow if we look at anyway, so firefighting is about $75,000 a year, which is great. But they provide an essential service. Yeah, they are a hero. I would like to see nurses make something comparable. And I feel like this is highly skewed because I don't know a firefighter that makes $75,000 a year.
And I was under the impression that
most are volunteers.
Yeah, I was going to say that most are volunteers.
Most are volunteers, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so there's just, you can see there's some real standouts in some things. In any case, yeah, so all these things get compounded, and we see what happens when well, we're living through it right now. And what's going to happen to these small areas, Main Street. But the people, what's going to happen to the 50,000 or so of us as this continues? Because, we can talk all about there's not as much risk as in a big city and blah, blah, blah. And, that's true for some reasons, certainly. But no one. I mean, if you look at the situation in New York right now, let's say, or even look at Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, the big breakouts are not in the city, really. They're in like the suburbs and in, external areas.
Yeah.
So I think a large part of that is because people go to one place to work, let's say, and then they go back to their kind of satellite towns, right? Now, on a small scale, that's like that here, but also we have this enormous influx seasonally of people. So if you think about the impact of that, there's a serious discussion that needs to be had here about prevention and about how we move forward over the next year, if not the next decade. And when things like, I don't know, Storyland start to open up, if that's smart.
Or like if they're gonna do the Freiburg Fair this year.
Well, yeah, and think about the economic impact alone of that. And Sandwich Fair is already closed. I mean, that's a much smaller.
Closed all the New Hampshire ones.
Much smaller thing, yeah. But I mean, think about the economic impact to this entire area of no fair, and no fair season at all. And that's what people are going to be arguing for: the economic impact, the economic impact. And while that's true, but there's no reason that people should have to die because somebody else created a bad system in which a few people control resources that then they gain access to by giving away their life to those same people. It's an unfair exchange, and we'll have to get into that another time, why this is BS. Maybe that'll be a Rev episode because I'll get worked up. But the people who own all this stuff make you buy it back from you. Sell your labor to them, and then you buy it back from them. So it's time to get over this idea that you will ever become them, and maybe anecdotally, but also you shouldn't want to.
Yeah.
I don't.
No.
More money, more problems.
Yeah. That's what they'd like you to think, right?
Yeah, you don't want money.
Fuck that song.
Well, I just look at it like, and people expect things of you.
No. Yeah, because like you demand that. Because you own their labor. You purchase their labor.
Yeah. And
then you sell commodities back to them for it. Like you did that to yourself. So the problems are due to that system and the class struggle within the rentier or ownership class. The problems are the people who have to supplicate themselves to that class in order to literally survive. So yeah, it might be like stressful to have to manage payroll or something, but like as we all know, like it's stressful to like not be able to eat and stuff like that.
Figure out how you're gonna buy a week's worth of groceries with $12.
Or like when your landlord decides he's gonna sell the house, right?
Yeah.
And then who is like that must be stressful for him, right? He's got to sell his house,
go through this process.
Right? But like that's your
Who's
house.
it really stressful for though?
You're living there, right? So like these are the sorts of things. Or like one of my landlords who decided it was our fault that there was no heat or hot water or whatever. So we went weeks in the winter without heat or water. Less money, more problems. For sure. But I mean, let them keep thinking. They got it tough.
You keep thinking that.
Let them get all soft. That's the thing we got. We are. I mean, a lot of us are built for this. I mean, if you've never starved for a day and everything's been kind of handed to you, maybe it's kind of fetishizing poverty or whatever. But like, if you've had everything handed to you, I mean, I'm sure this crisis is really tough for you right now. For not for good reasons, but just because you're a soft little baby. And that's probably why you're on the steps of your state capitol with an AR-15 crying about not being able to get your nails did or whatever. So maybe you should toughen up, Buttercup. You know, people like that always like to tell us how soft we are and how, oh, you need your safe space and all this stuff, right? Yeah.
Life's hard, get over it.
Yeah. Okay. Toughen up, because we're going to survive this. We're going to survive, because we've eaten Totina's party pizzas, for 25 years. The amount of preservatives alone.
Content.
There's no nutritional value in there.
Parker, I couldn't hear what you said.
I said the sodium levels, it's mummifying.
Exactly, yeah. You know, we're basically just pillars of salt. You can't do shit to us.
Unmovable.
Yeah, we exist on a whole nother plane of reality. So I hope you're ready to try to starve us out, because it's going to be a lot harder than you think, you upper class cucks. We're coming for you. That's my final point, I guess. Anybody else?
I like that.
Oh, we will talk about it. But Color Out of Space.
Good movie.
It's good, yeah. Recommend. I definitely have a thing we can connect it to. But Color Out of Space, great movie. And also check out Dark Water if you have time. That was a good one as well. But yeah, any final thoughts?
I got nothing.
Yes, 3.
In a pinch, eat some grass.
Charlie is a survivor. Yeah. This everybody take care of yourselves and be safe and be strong, because this is day to day still. We're gonna have to figure this all out together. So be well. Thank you for watching, and workers of the world unite. Become a wobbly and join IWW. And be a part of the best union. Yeah. All power to the people.